Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
What if I recorded this entire episode with my eyes shut?
I don't know. I'd feel a little upset because I think you'd be sleep talking and then you'd start saying weird words.
But the audience doesn't know that my eyes are shut.
You just told them your eyes are shut.
Oh, what if they've been shut this entire time?
They've been shut for every episode we've ever recorded. You've actually been sleeping through this entire podcast. Yeah.
What if I'm finally awake, like Skyrim?
You're finally awake.
I'm finally awake. That's a topical meme now because, Oblivion was just released.
Yeah, do you think they're going to remaster Morrowind next, or just release Skyrim again, or just release Oblivion again for like 20 years?
Was Skyrim remastered?
They did remaster Skyrim, yeah. There was like the Game of the Year edition and then remastered version. It's called Skyrim Special Edition. I don't know if it's necessarily remastered beyond, it apparently quote-unquote has stunning detail. It is 8 gigabytes.
Oblivion remastered was 115. So then Morrowind will be like 250 gigabytes. Then they'll go back and do what comes before Morrowind.
Daggerfall?
Oh, Daggerfall, yeah. So then they'll redo Daggerfall, and it'll be a terabyte.
If they redo Daggerfall, so Daggerfall has, the original Daggerfall has one of the largest...
it's the size of England. Or, I'm sorry, size of the UK.
Size of the UK, and the way it was done was through procedural generation. So if you're walking through Daggerfall, like, the landscape might look a little differently than my landscape, because it's procedural generation. What they should do, if they remaster it, is not do procedural generation, and just map out a massive map the size of Great Britain.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about Oblivion. My recently played has been a game called Old Skies. This game was released back in April 23rd of 2025. It was developed by Dave Gilbert of Wadjet Eye Games and his team, which is a relatively smaller team. They develop and publish a lot of really good games. Wadjet Eyes is one of the companies that really uses AEGS a lot. A lot of their games come through that development software. It's a cool, like, kind of a software that is like something that you can learn at home, and I believe it is free. So like if you were interested in learning how to make an adventure game, you can download AEGS and you can make adventure games of Wadjet Eye quality, assuming that you know someone who can draw. Old Sky is about a time traveler who goes to different locations, and her name is Fia. Fia essentially works for a company in the future that sells and travels through time regularly, but traveling through time takes a lot out of the time traveler and also out of the time travelers.
Okay.
If you're a time traveler, your timeline is different than other people, and you can run into paradoxes in your timeline versus other people. And so, like, there could be like a restaurant down the street from you, and then if you're with a group of time travelers, maybe that restaurant actually doesn't exist and has never been there at all, but you could really like it and you have memories of it. But there was a paradox that caused it to go away. So this group's constantly kind of running into that. And the game takes place not only in the future, but also going through all the different time periods. From the first place that I traveled to was 2024, which was the distant past from at least where the game takes place. I think is in 2050 or something like that. But you go through all sorts of different eras, gangster eras, Gilded Ages, even like early 2000s. And you're either working with people who have paid the privilege of time travel, or you're investigating something. So it's Old Skies. I'm really excited. The last game that Wadjet Eyes released that I really liked was Unavowed, which has nothing to do with the Obsidian game, also called Unavowed. But Unavowed is a really good adventure game that I really liked, so I'm hoping to get the same type of Old Skies. It seems like it's right up that alley. They also released The Secret of the Hobbs Barrow, but I don't think Dave Gilbert was directly involved out, and it's a little bit off the beaten path from some. They do have some games that are a little bit off the beaten path. Some of their games are like not necessarily up my cup of tea, and Hobbs Barrow I'm still trying to get into. But I think that Old Sky hooked me faster than Hobbs Barrow hooked me, as it were. Zach, what have you recently been playing?
Recently, Seth, I've been playing Half-Life Decay, which we talked about in our Gearbox Half-Life episode just a few episodes back. I've been playing it with my friend Nathan via Sven Co-op. Sven Co-op is a useful tool used for playing Half-Life in co-op mode. I think I've talked about it before, but Sven Co-op is neat. We figured out an easy way to get it to work, and we downloaded a couple of the Decay maps, which have been ported over to Sven Co-op from the PS2 original version, and we've been going through it. So for those who didn't listen to our Gearbox episode, Decay was developed by Gearbox Software in 2001, released as part of the PS2 port of Half-Life. You play as either Gina Cross or Colette Green, two scientists at the Black Mesa Research Facility, who, of course, are involved in the resonance cascade that leads to a bunch of shenanigans. And Sven Co-op allows us to play this game on PC, where the game was originally released for the PlayStation 2. And I've really been enjoying playing through it. We're almost done with it. I think we have 2 or 3 more chapters left, but we are playing it on a work night, so it ended up getting kind of late, and we were like, we'll just pick this up next time we have time. So I think we have 1 or 2 missions left where we're going to Zen, and then from there, who knows what we'll play. Sven Co-op allows for any Gold Source Half-Life game to be played in co-op, so you could play through all of Half-Life in co-op if you so wished. It might be a little different than playing normal Half-Life, and probably a little bit more chaotic, but it's possible. There's also a horror mod that I've been wanting to try, specifically in co-op, because I heard it's kind of, and hopefully that one goes well, and that maybe will be one of my next recently plays. Anyway, getting into today's episode. So last week, Seth talked about Super Godzilla as his retro rewind, and that got me into thinking about Godzilla video games and going into that whole subject. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Godzilla video games. I'm a big fan of Godzilla. I'm a big fan of the films. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down just the basics of the history of Godzilla in terms of his, early days and into the film history, and then we're going to get into different video games. And also, we're not going to talk about all of the Godzilla video games, because there's a lot, so we're going to focus on some of the ones that at least I found to be most interesting and most worth mentioning. But there's certainly more out there, so if you have a Godzilla video game that you're a fan of and we don't mention it, let us know, and I'll let you know how to do that at the end of this episode. But getting into the history of Godzilla, you're going to hear me refer to a few different eras in Japanese history. The Showa era, the Heisei era, and the Reiwa era. These are named for the different emperors of Japan who ruled during those particular eras. The Showa era is the reign of Emperor Hirohito, known as Emperor Showa from 1926 until 1989. The Heisei era corresponds to his son, Emperor Akihito, and that lasted from 1989 until 2019 when he abdicated the throne. The current emperor of Japan is Emperor Naruhito, who took the throne on May 1st of 2019. So he is considered the Reiwa era. So you'll hear me use those terms, so just know if I'm referring to Showa, it's the era of Hirohito. Heisei, it's Akihito, and Reiwa is Naruhito. With that out of the way, when we talk about Godzilla, it's important that we talk about the type of filming done for Godzilla films, and this is something called tokusatsu. This translates to special filming in Japanese, and it's in general just the term used to describe movies or TV shows that have a heavy use of special effects. Some of the earliest tokusatsu films from Japan were Journey to the West in 1917, The Great Buddha Arrival in 1934, Princess Kaguya in 1935, and The Daughter of the Samurai in 1937. The genre, however, was popularized by a film by Toho called Gojira, which we know as Godzilla, in 1954, which was made to both capitalize on the popularity of the American film The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms from 1953 and the re-release of King Kong, which originally came out in 1933. It also was written to tell a story about the recent atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And there was also influence from the Daigo Fukuyo Maru incident, which was a tuna boat that was contaminated by nuclear fallout due to the US Castle Bravo test off the coast of Bikini Atoll. A Japanese boat was contaminated by radiation from the Castle Bravo test that the US was conducting, and the crew would suffer acute radiation syndrome. Thankfully, most of the crew would survive. The only only one that perished was, unfortunately, the chief radio officer who had life-threatening damage from the acute radiation syndrome.
Godzilla would utilize a filming technique called suitmation. As opposed to other monster films like King Kong, which use stop motion, Godzilla would feature an actor for a good chunk of the earlier movies. It was primarily Haruo Nakajima, with some assistance by Katsumi Tezuka, wearing a rubber suit. They would film him in the suit against scale models of the location that he was destroying, which sounds like a great job. Well, how awesome is that?
A guy in a big rubber costume just smashing buildings.
Pro, you get to smash stuff all day for your job. Con, you're in a giant rubber suit.
Yes, yeah. Very, very sweaty rubber suit.
Hopefully you have enough joy in destroying models and just to overcome the heat of the suit. Now, while this may take away from some of the charm of stop motion, it added an entirely new charm of watching these rubber creatures absolutely decimate model buildings. The first Godzilla film really stands out compared to other films that will follow it. It's dark, it's gritty, very focused on the horrors of nuclear holocaust and the people affected by it, which came out in 1954 and was done in Japan, so it was pretty close to home for everyone making this movie.
It came out the same year that the tuna boat incident happened, where these people had acute radiation poisoning, so this was like something that was incredibly fresh in their minds, beyond the effects of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
The first Godzilla film ends with a haunting reality that if nuclear testing continues, even greater horrors could arise. A lot of those references would be removed in the American dub and rework of the film Godzilla King of Monsters, because America doesn't like to think about the tragedies it's committed. The sequel, Godzilla Raids Again, contains some similar themes of anti-nuclear sentiment, but also introduces the concept of giant monsters fighting. The film would introduce one of the first non-human enemies of Godzilla, Anguirus, who appears like a spike ankylosaurus. The series would soon evolve into mostly being focused on the monsters and their fighting, with far less emphasis on devastation inflicted on the human population and messages that hit really close home. It turned into, from having a heartfelt story of a strong message to Pacific Rim.
Basically. Through the Showa era, there were 15 films released under the Godzilla franchise. These films would include films where he fought like a three-headed dragon called King Ghidorah. He would fight the Mothra, who had her own film just called Mothra. There was Rodan, who also had his own film, Rodan. There was a robot version of Godzilla called Mechagodzilla, and Godzilla even fought King Kong. The American influence on Godzilla would get his own appearance in King Kong vs. Godzilla, which came out in 1962. After the reign of Emperor Showa ended and the Heisei era began, Godzilla would continue powering through. He had rematches against King Ghidorah, he had rematches against Mothra, Mechagodzilla was back, and then there would be a break. Production on Godzilla films essentially just took a break after 1995's Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. During this time, though, the films had slowly been gaining more and more popularity in the United States. Godzilla and tokusatsu as a whole definitely owe popularity outside of Japan to the prevalence of bootleg fan sub VHS tapes. In the early days, these were distributed by local film clubs, VHS trading groups, and at conventions. There were official tapes of early Godzilla films. I don't want that to be neglected. Early Godzilla films did get released in the United States. Some of them did as official VHS tapes, often from studios that would acquire them from Japan and then dub them. But these were heavily edited and often really badly dubbed. And to be honest, when it came to people watching these films, a lot of times they wanted to watch the original. And the only way to watch that was in Japanese, so you needed to have it subbed. And if there weren't official subs, you had to get someone to sub it for you. So there's a whole process involved in the fan subbing community, which primarily was prevalent in early anime. Early tokusatsu would also get its spread due to shows like Mystery Science Theater 3000, which got its start on KTMA and later on the Sci-Fi Channel. And on MST3K, they often showed films like Gamera, Godzilla, or other dubbed tokusatsu films, usually lower quality tokusatsu films, and provide their own comedic commentary.
In 1998, this all came to a collision when TriStar Pictures released their version of Godzilla starring Matthew Broderick, and a lot of cast members from The Simpsons. Hank Azaria and Harry Shearer are prominent main cast members, and Nancy Cartwright makes a cameo appearance. The film featured predominant use of CGI to create the titular Godzilla, who was also redesigned to look more like a weird T-Rex. The film did really well at the box office, but ultimately critically bombed. Fans of Godzilla hated it, and newcomers hated it. Everybody hated it. Even the cast and crew working on it hated it, with most of them, if not all of them, regretted even working on it or acting in it. Toho equally hated it, but would actually keep the monster and canonize it into Godzilla lore. They would rebrand the creature just as Zilla, as according to the director of the 2004 film Godzilla Final Wars, the 1998 movie took the god out of Godzilla. Have you seen this movie?
1998's Godzilla?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it. I think 1998's Godzilla is a mediocre monster movie and a really bad Godzilla movie.
Whether it was due to lackluster response from the 1998 TriStar film or just genuine desire to continue, Toho would reboot the Godzilla franchise in 1999 with the release of Godzilla 2000, creating a new era of films called the Millennial Series. This era would consist of 6 films, with the last being Godzilla Final Wars, an epic all-out brawl between 15 different monsters, including Zilla from 1998, who gets absolutely decimated by the real Godzilla.
Zilla's scene in Final Wars is about 10 seconds long. So the plot of Final Wars is about these aliens who, for some reason, are summoning monsters onto Earth to cause chaos. And Godzilla is basically Earth's protector. So he's fighting all these aliens mano a mano. At one point, though, he teams up with Mothra. It's a wild movie. A lot of it doesn't make sense. But there is one sequence where the alien is like, all right, let's summon our next competitor. And like, it shows Sydney, Australia, and there's a beam of light. And Zilla, this like gross CGI version of Zilla, just appears in the middle of the street. Godzilla's there. Zilla charges Godzilla. Godzilla blasts him with atomic breath, and Zilla just dies. It literally takes like 5 seconds. Now, after another hiatus and the beginning of a new line of slightly better American Godzilla films produced by Legendary, Toho would release Shin Godzilla, directed by Hideki Anno, who was the creator of Evangelion, the anime. Shin Godzilla would come out in 2016, and it also serves as the last Suitmation Godzilla film for the time. Toho would go on to work with Netflix to produce 3 Godzilla animated films: Godzilla Planet of Monsters, Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, and Godzilla the Planet Eater. And most recently, Toho would produce Godzilla -1, which would be released to critical acclaim. Godzilla -1 actually is set prior to the first Godzilla, like timeline-wise. It takes place just after the war, so Japan is still in kind of a recovery state, and Godzilla decides to attack, like, recovering Japan. And this Godzilla is fully CGI, but he looks amazing. And Godzilla -1 is a very good film. I highly recommend it.
So I was looking up on Reddit about Zilla, and there was a comment from 16 days ago on the Godzilla Reddit subreddit that said, "How would Zilla from Godzilla Final Wars do against a fully grown MonsterVerse Kong?" And the first comment is not great. The second comment is decapitated in an instant. So now that we've probably eaten up most of our time talking about the history of Godzilla, let's get into the real reason that you listen to this podcast, and people will timestamp this area to say this is when the podcast starts: some video games. There are a ton of games that feature Godzilla in some form. Sometimes you play as Godzilla. Sometimes Godzilla is the enemy. We're going to talk about a handful of them, and primarily some of the more interesting titles from the history of Godzilla. The first of the games was just called Godzilla and was released in 1983. It was developed by Glenn Fisher and published by the Codeworks for the Commodore 64. It's a strategy game where you take control of the military and they're attempting to stop Godzilla before he reaches Tokyo. You are given a grid that will randomly assign Godzilla to a spot on the grid. It's your job to move troops or attack Godzilla. Do you know where he's going to specifically pop up or no?
Nope.
It's kind of like
he just pops up randomly. He just doesn't
like
pop
Battleship.
up. Yeah, except you can see him.
Yeah, right. And you have to make sure you put your people in the right spots. You can attack Godzilla via land using land troops, sea using battleships, air using airplanes, or you could drop a nuke. However, if you drop a nuke, it will wipe out not just the space it lands on, but also the surrounding 8 spaces. So if you do want to avoid dropping it near the place that you are defending or your troops, because the nuke is even like worse than Godzilla, because the nuke doesn't care. At least Godzilla has emotion. The nuke does not have emotion. The game uses very simple graphics, so if you're making this up to be something really cool in your head, even if you're going to boot it up, it'd be very disappointing. The map of Tokyo is fairly jagged and blocky, while Godzilla looks like a small green lizard on the screen. So just take whatever vision you created in your mind's eye and just make it really, really, really basic.
Now, speaking of blocky, Godzilla's next appearance would be in Godzilla and the Martians, released in 1984, developed by Neil Streeter for the ZX Spectrum. Like other ZX Spectrum games, the graphics are fairly simple, with obstacles on the screen appearing like purple stools. Literally, they're like round tops with 2 legs. They look like a stool. And your main character looks like a stick man. Now, I'm going to describe to you the gameplay, Seth, and I want you to think if this sounds familiar to you. So at the top of the screen, you have Godzilla. He's standing there next to a woman that he's captured. Or actually, he isn't captured. He's just standing next to her, according to the lore of the game. And then he's standing on girders, right? And then you have to climb to the top of the screen and save the person that's been captured.
Are you wearing coveralls?
You would be if you could see your character. They are stick man.
It's very close to a game that was in arcades.
Yeah, that's right. It's a Donkey Kong clone. Because it's a Donkey Kong clone, Godzilla appears at the top of the screen, and he's actually pretty tiny. Like, he can stand apparently on top of a construction site. Absolutely fine.
Wait. According to the lore, he's standing next to this lady?
Yeah, so according to the story of the game, Godzilla is protecting the lady from the aliens that are attacking.
Oh, okay. And you're playing as the aliens, or you're playing as just a man?
You're just a man.
Are you trying to also get protected by Godzilla? Is that why you're climbing these girders?
I think the idea is that Godzilla can't save the lady, but he can protect her, but you have to save her.
What if you are actually a Martian pretending to be a man, and Godzilla has seen through your ruse, and he's actually fighting you, and you're the actual villain?
Maybe.
It's kind of like Braid.
You know what? I bet that's what they were going for. Anyway, it's a very simple game, and it also sounds very obnoxious. Like, the audio and the sound effects are just really obnoxious. Next up, though, in 1985, Toho would finally get into the actual controlling of these Godzilla games. They would publish a game called Gojira-kun from the developer Compile. This is a puzzle game released on the MSX computer, and it features cutesy versions of Godzilla and all the other monsters. They're kind of chibi designed. You were tasked with destroying blocks, and you smash them with Godzilla's fist, and you have to climb up vines and avoid the other monsters that are trying to attack you. Gojira-kun would be ported over to the Game Boy in 1990, and when it came out in the US, it was just called Godzilla.
In 1986, the movie Monster Game would be released for Apple II and Commodore 64 from Epic. This would not only feature Godzilla, but was also a crossover with other movie and TV monsters. Epix was able to officially license Godzilla from Toho, so he appears in the game as himself. The Godzilla, not Toho.
Not the company.
Well, that'd be funny if there was a man named Toho that appeared. But other characters that appear, however, were not licensed. So there is the Glog, which is based on the monster from The Blob. Mr. Meringue, based on the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters. And Mechatron, who is based on both Topspin and Megatron from the Transformers, which sounds like a great game, and then you remember it's on the Apple II. So it's not going to be like virtual fighting with these people, but I really love that they're like, we don't have the license for the Blob or Ghostbusters or Transformers because those are way too expensive. So let's just make something and change the name just a little bit and have it be exactly what it is.
But we got Godzilla.
Yeah, and then somebody from Ghostbusters is like, this looks like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and they'll be like, well, actually, he's made of meringue. So
actually, he's my own original character.
My own original character who's a massive pile of meringue. They're like, we hate you so much. The game itself is split into 5 different scenarios. There is Berserk, you accumulate points by destroying things. Escape, you flee the military. Search, you have to find the monster's child, which is probably just a little version of the monster.
Canonically, Godzilla does have a child. His name is Manila, but I
Godzilla
don't...
has a family.
Yeah, but I don't think Stay Puft Marshmallow Man has a little Stay Puft.
I don't think Megatron had a child either.
Megatron Jr.
Megatron's just a tiny...
Does he turn into a smaller gun?
Well, no, does it like the GoBots? Aren't there tiny little robots?
Yeah, he's a GoBot.
Does a GoBot have a tinier is there a tinier bot that goes on the GoBot? Anyway,
yeah, I hope so.
Anyway, there's also destroy landmarks where you have to destroy a major landmark like the Tokyo Tower, Statue of Liberty, or Big Ben. And then finally there's lunch, where you must eat vehicles and civilians. The next game that we're going to talk about is Godzilla Challenge 1 for Takara Video Challenger, released in 1987. The Video Challenger was a VHS-based light gun system where you would watch a video and occasionally targets or other items would pop up that would be shot at. The game is very simple, with clips from Godzilla films being played, and occasionally you are prompted to shoot the screen with your light gun. And they made a decent number of these games.
Yeah, there's like other systems. We've talked about them. We had a whole episode.
Yeah, there's in fact an entire episode called VHS games, and we talk about the light gun system integrated into VHS, and it's a novel concept. It really brought TV and interactions with that TV together. Like, it kind of like, I feel like video games was considered a toy.
Yeah.
And television was considered a separate medium from that toy. These light gun video games with VHS kind of was like, oh, these mediums are kind of like mixed. And these mediums have kind of continually mixed. And now we have movies based on video games based on movies, and so on and so forth.
In 1988, Godzilla would finally come to the Famicom with the release of Godzilla Monster of Monsters. Developed by Compile, you take on the role of either Godzilla or Mothra. You then move your character on this like hexagonal board with various enemies also moving around, so like when you move, one of them moves. And depending on where you land, you either enter a stage that's like a side-scrolling level, or you have to fight one of the monsters. There are different planets that you can go to, and each planet also has their own monster. There are 8 monsters, with some of them not even being from Godzilla films. So some of the ones that aren't from Godzilla films are Moguera from the 1957 film The Mysterians, Varan from the 1958 film Varan the Unbelievable, Baragon from the 1965 film Frankenstein Conquers the World, and then there are also mushroom monsters from the 1963 film Matango, and one of the enemies is just the spaceship from the 1977 Star Wars knockoff The War in Space. So it's kind of like a tokusatsu extravaganza of kaiju from films tangentially connected to Godzilla. If you've heard of Godzilla Monster of Monsters, it might actually be because, for 2 reasons. 1, the AVGN covered it, so it got a little popular from that. But 2, it's actually the source of a popular creepypasta called NES Godzilla Creepypasta. Really clever name. The story in this creepypasta features a person playing the game only to discover that it's possessed by an entity called Red, which is this like weird crab-like demon creature. And the game gets more and more disturbing and realistic as the player continues playing. What's really cool, though, about the creepypasta is that when it came out, it came with screenshots and different images to illustrate the story, which is unique. Not a lot of creepypastas do this, so there is kind of a visual element to this story that you're reading, which does make it a bit more creepy. A sequel to Godzilla Monster of Monsters would release in 1992 called Godzilla 2 War of the Monsters. In this game, you don't play as Godzilla, you play as the military, and you are attempting to stop Godzilla from destroying the city. The game was developed and published by Toho, and interestingly enough, was only released in the United States. What's also interesting is the game was also an entirely different game. Toho had wanted to make a game based on Rodan, who had initially appeared in his own film of the same name in 1956, and then later would meet up with Godzilla when they fought Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, in 1964.
And Rodan's like a pterodactyl, isn't he?
Yeah, he's like a pterodactyl. The Rodan game they developed ended up scoring really badly with audiences. I'm going to assume because when they gave it to children to play in the 1990s or late 80s, they might have not have been 100% sure who Rodan was. Like, they might have been kind of aware who he was, but Godzilla, I think, is just a bit more of a... He's a bit more of a powerhouse powerhouse. It's like having a game about Pluto, but not about Mickey. You know,
Right.
like
Is Rodan Godzilla's buddy?
they are buddies. Yeah, they fight sometimes though.
Yeah, well, I feel like if you're friends or neighbors with Godzilla, you're probably gonna end up fighting him.
Yeah, I feel like Godzilla just decides one day whether or not you're friends with him, and it depends on the mood he's in. So sometimes he'll be your friend and you team up with him, and other times he'll shoot you with his atomic breath.
And usually just by screaming at you.
Yeah, that's when you know. When Godzilla lets out his roar, you know it's probably a bad day for you. In any case, Toho would redesign this game and make it just about Godzilla, not about Rodan, and then it came out.
Godzilla made his first leap to 16-bit in 1992 Battle Soccer Field no Hasha. In English, it's Battle Soccer Champions of the Field. This is a soccer game developed by Banpresto that features various tokusatsu, kaiju, and anime characters, specifically characters from Ultraman, Gundam, Kamen Rider, and, of course, Godzilla. Battle Soccer Field no Hasha is a colorful, cartoony game with most of the characters having more chibi-like sprites. Each team has a representative of the specific franchise, with Godzilla's team consisting of Rodan, King Caesar, Jet Jaguars, and Godzilla. Most of his team is staffed out by Jet Jaguars.
I love Jet Jaguars. Do you know what Jet Jaguar looks like?
No.
He's a big robot man, and he shows up in Godzilla vs. Megalon, and he was created... First of all, Jet Jaguar was designed by a child. Like, in the story, he's designed by a child, but he was also designed by a child in real life because Toho ran a competition, and it was the winning design. Jet Jaguar looks like someone looked... The kid was just really into Ultraman and wanted Ultraman in Godzilla.
This Battle Soccer Field no Hasha game, they just play soccer, but they're chibi style, right? So they're not actually... Like, Godzilla's not actually any different size than Ultraman.
No, everyone's the same size and they just play soccer.
Super Godzilla soon followed, also for the SNES, released by Advanced Communication Company in 1993 and published by Toho. Super Godzilla is a game where you guide the titular Godzilla through the city. You smash various buildings in your path and you try to preserve his power levels. You'll occasionally come across different enemies, all being enemies from the various Godzilla film series. The game has a bit of a unique POV where for a lot of the game you are looking up at a Godzilla from street level. You also have a little map that you can refer to in order to avoid obstacles. The more obstacles you encounter, lower your energy level, which can be renewed by going to a power plant. The remaining energy you have will be your energy for fighting one of the enemies you encounter. TriStar would dip their hands into Godzilla games with a trifecta of titles: Godzilla Online, Godzilla The Aftermath, and G-Patrol VR Combat Simulator. All three of these games were tie-ins with the 1998 hit movie Godzilla, which, as we discussed earlier, was not a hit, at least. G-Patrol VR Combat Simulator came first, releasing in 1997. That is just a bad name for a Godzilla game. The game is a sprite-based 3D view similar to the game Battlezone. You pilot a tank and you shoot at monsters. There is a kind of vague plot to the game where it plays as you, the player, playing as a soldier in a combat simulator training to fight a future Godzilla threat, which I believe at the end of the game, you fight Godzilla, I would assume.
I don't actually know. I do know that the end of the... So the game was considered lost for a while because it was exclusively a Macromedia Flash game. But at the end of the game, I think it says Godzilla coming soon to theaters near you. So...
Yeah. That's just a game that probably didn't need to even exist. So, like, I picture you can sell, like, G-Patrol VR Combat Simulator. You have it in a big tank in an arcade game cabinet. And then you drop the G-Patrol because that's just dumb. And then you drop the VR Combat Simulator part because that also just makes sense. You just say Godzilla Hunter. That's what you call it. You usually put it out in that big, like, action font. You say Godzilla Hunter, and you climb into a machine, and you shoot Godzilla. That would have been a good arcade game.
That would have been a good arcade game.
Next of the trifecta of games is Godzilla Online, which was developed by Mythic Entertainment and was exclusive through GameStorm, an online gaming service. Players can take one of four roles: a soldier trying to kill baby Godzilla creatures, a journalist trying to document everything, a scientist trying to collect blood from baby Godzillas, or a baby Godzilla trying to defend themselves. The game has a few different game modes, including a free-for-all, team deathmatch, last man standing, and capture the flag. The game itself plays on a 3D isometric-like view. Also sounds like a Tribes or a Quake mod.
Oh, that would actually be really cool.
Finally, Godzilla The Aftermath It's a kind of depressingly unique title developed by Sony Pictures Imageworks, where you take on the role of a survivor after the events of the 1998 movie, where your box office results were bad.
Yeah, you play as a studio executive.
A studio executive where you just like sit in your empty boardroom, just like gazing out the window, and in the background you just see like poor press releases for the movie. No, in Godzilla Aftermath you play as the survivor and you walk around a destroyed Manhattan. It's also a social game with the ability to talk to other players who are also playing Godzilla the Aftermath. I don't think any of these games need to be made except for maybe the Quake mod.
This wouldn't be the last of Zilla appearing in video games. Zilla, arguably, he doesn't appear in any of these games, actually, but he doesn't technically appear in these other ones either. Zilla, or rather Zilla Jr., would appear in Godzilla the series and Godzilla the series Monster Wars, both based on Godzilla the series, an animated series that came out as a sequel to the 1998 movie. In the show, it's about a group of people that hang out with Zilla Jr. So at the end of Godzilla the movie from 1998, Godzilla lays a bunch of eggs, and the eggs get blown up, but one of the eggs remains. So because that egg remains, it hatches, and it becomes the Godzilla Jr. or Zilla Jr., however you want to refer to him, in the Godzilla the series show. These games are based on that show. So in the first game, which came out for the Game Boy by Crawfish Entertainment and published in 1999, you play as Zilla Jr. and you stroll down the street, and when a member of the military comes up to you, you stomp on them or you punch them. It's pretty monotonous. You literally just walk from one direction forward and you punch or block against attacks. Someone described this game as a beat 'em up. I think that's a very loose definition of what a beat 'em up is, because you're literally walking in a straight line. There's no movement. You're not going up and down. You're not like, doing different attack moves. You're literally just punching. That's it. The sequel, Monster Wars, was also developed by Crawfish and is very similar to the first game, though this time you shoot fireballs. The story, however, was adapted from a storyline in the TV show just called Monster Wars, which was like one of the episode arcs. Now, the last game that we're going to talk about for this episode is going to be Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee, which came out for the GameCube, Xbox, and Game Boy Advance in 2002, developed by Pipeworks Software and published by Infogrames. I'm pretty sure Godzilla Destroy All Monsters came out because Toho was like, we need to put out a Godzilla game in the United States that is not about this dang 1998 TriStar film. So they made a brawler fighter for these consoles where you just play as classic Godzilla monsters and you fight each other. It's this large open map type of arena that you fight in. You play as your chosen monster, you duke it out against other monsters, and you can throw them into other set pieces, and you can demolish cities. The game, I don't think, scored amazingly well, but I remember playing it, and it's probably the first time you ever actually feel like Godzilla, right? It's a 1-against-1 monster fighter where you can throw King Ghidorah into a building. It might not be a very good looking building, but this really set up what future Godzilla games would be. There was a sequel in 2004 called Godzilla Save the Earth, which just kind of expanded more on this idea. And other future Godzilla games would take on this large-scale 1v1 fighter where you can really do damage across a city. And it just feels, they started to feel more and more like what we think of as Godzilla. With that being said, though, that's going to wrap it up for our Godzilla episode. A bit of a long one as we kind of really took a deep dive into these games. But we're really just scratching the surface. There are a ton of Godzilla games out there. Some of them not great, some of them pretty good, but definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of that big old monster. Now, to get into our retro rewind, Seth had me play Pajama Sam 2 Thunder and Lightning Aren't So Frightening, developed by Humongous. It's a 1998 sequel to Pajama Sam, There's No Need to Hide When It's Dark Outside. The game features Sam, or Pajama Sam, going to the Worldwide Weather Company to confront Thunder and Lightning because he's afraid of them. He gets there and learns that they're actually really nice people, but he accidentally messes up their weather machine and breaks it, so it's your job to go through the company to find the missing parts of the weather machine so you can save the day. It's your usual humongous point-and-click game, but I want to say it holds a very special place in my heart because it taught me about unnecessary bureaucracy. You see, the game is set in this massive facility that is run like an office, and you end up meeting a character. So you need to get a rubber band from him because he's the office supply guy. So you see a box of rubber bands, and you point at it, and you say, "Can I have a rubber band?" And he says, "Yeah, sure, just get me that rubber band request form." And you're like, "Rubber band request form?" He's like, "Yeah, you need to get a rubber band request form signed. You need to get this signed by the vice president of paperclips and rubber bands, and then I can give you a rubber band." And you have to go around and find the vice president of paperclips and rubber bands to get this paper signed, or find a way to get it signed so that you can just get a rubber band, which is used for like a puzzle. It is a very silly joke about red tape that I definitely missed as a kid, but I get a kick out of it today. Does Pajama Sam 2 Thunder and Lightning Aren't So Frightening hold up? Of course it does. It's a humongous game. Every humongous game I've ever played holds up. Next week, Seth, you can play one of my favorite humongous games. Putt Putt Joins the Parade.
Great, I'm excited to play that. You had me, though, play Urban Yeti for the Game Boy Advance. Developed by Cave and Barn Studios and published by Telegames and released on the Game Boy Advance in 2002, you play as a male Yeti who is on a quest to find his mate, but unfortunately, humans get in your way. The perspective of the game plays like the original Grand Theft Auto, as in Grand Theft Auto 1, the game with a top-down perspective, except instead of looking at a criminal, you're looking at a massive Yeti. A reviewer from IGN, Craig Harris, said that the game had a slow frame rate and some technical problems, and it felt like it was developed by, quote, a few guys down in someone's basement, not like a standard studio, which, as someone who has played this game, I agree, Craig. I agree. The game did have some technical problems, and also there was some frame rate slowdown. You have to like stomp around in a city, and you punch people, and they go flying back, and then they still try to team up to you and try to kill you. I got stuck in an alleyway punching a dumpster, and it just wouldn't get out of my way. You're simultaneously very strong and very weak. When you punch somebody, they go flying away, but they don't go very far. So then they're just on top of you again really quick, because apparently people in this city have 1,000,000 hit points, unlike in real life when you have one. Though I did find it humorous when I was inevitably killed in the first level. The camera, I believe, focuses on what killed you, but I was killed by a guy who was in the street, and he went on to get hit by a car. So then the focus of the camera just followed this guy while the game was like ending, while he got hit by a car and kept getting thrown further and further away from where I actually died, and the game wouldn't actually come to an end until the animation was done. So I just watched this guy get hit over and over again with the car because he would just keep getting up after getting tossed, and eventually the car took a turn and he went flying into a lake. This game's a solid, like, just avoid it. It's not worth checking it out. Maybe look at some screenshots if you're really curious. It's got a fun cover, that's for sure. It's just Bigfoot's butt trying to go off to find his lady friend. Next week, Zach, you could play Mortal Kombat 4 for the Game Boy Color.
Great, I will. Well, thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. I would say we're at PAX, but we actually just finished PAX as of yesterday. But in any case, thank you again, everyone, for listening. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. If you remember a Godzilla game that you were a big fan of, let us know by emailing us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found, be it Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on YouTube. We're also available on social media, Classic Gaming Brothers or CG Brothers Pod. And of course, you can find us on classicgamingbrothers.com. With that, Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.